Today, I've got the pleasure of talking with Jay Tiegs. We talk to Jay about his military career, his brush with suicide, how he overcame his fixed mindset, and the amazing future in front of him. Super likable guy. You're going to love this one. Enjoy. Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. I've got another amazing guest for you today. I've got Jay Tiegs on the podcast. Jay, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's an honor to be here.
So I'm going to label this one a story that you're going to hear of adaptability, transition, and reinvention. And you'll find out why I labeled it that way, and maybe Jay will find out why I labeled it that way as we go through. I do want to say right off the bat that if you're watching this or you want to watch it, Jay has an amazing t-shirt on that says dominate and a US flag on the right hand sleeve, short sleeve. So it's a really cool shirt. And like we were kidding before we went on, if you wear a shirt like that, you better be ready to bring it. So Jay is definitely ready to bring it today. So let me tell you a little bit about Jay before we get started. So Jay helps. Well, first of all, Jay's a certified high performance coach and leadership speaker. He helps veterans, executives, and entrepreneurs improve their time management skills, develop courage and confidence. I want to dig into that for sure, and develop discipline so that they can lead more effectively and have more work-life balance. As I said, he's a high performance coach. He's a transitioning veteran with over 25 years of military experience and service, both as an enlisted soldier and eventually commissioned officer, right, Jay?
Yes, sir.
Yes, congratulations.
Thank you.
His mantra, do hard things, has enabled him to overcome many struggles in life and achieve success. From a directionless teenager who grew up in a fatherless home to a commissioned officer in the United States Army, where he successfully commanded 2 units that specialize in leadership development. Jay is also the host of the Do Hard Things podcast, which I had the pleasure to be a guest on. And he just told me the episode dropped today. So Do Hard Things podcast, Mike Malatesta, check it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
His podcast is a top 5% podcast located on all global platforms. He's also a running coach, the father of triplet daughters. God bless you. And an outdoor hair. Yeah. Well, yeah, you and me both. And an outdoor adventure enthusiast. So let's get into this. Jay, I start every podcast with the same simple question, and that is, how did it happen for you?
Yeah, how did it happen for me? We talk about transformation and just transition. I mean, for me, I would say a culminating event was the day that I wanted to end my life. How it happened for me was that wake-up call. I had Springfield 1911. I kept having this thought of going back behind my house and shooting myself about 10 years ago. And like so many veterans, I think we joined the military. It was this way for me, and it is a lot for my fellow brothers and sisters in arms, is that we run away from something in our childhood looking for something better. Not everybody, but for a lot of us. So I had a pretty traumatic, physically and emotionally abusive upbringing. And then you join the military to serve, and my whole motivation was to find role models, find the father that I didn't have, and maybe make something of myself, because there wasn't anything for me back home in that broken environment. And then the Army layers on its trauma onto you with some of the experiences that they sent me on. So I had this like whirlwind of stuff to unpack, and it took me wanting to kill myself before I finally realized that I've got to make some serious shifts in my life. And that was like the light bulb moment for me. And it was really, choosing to live when I ultimately wanted to end it all, because I didn't want to leave my kids without a father. Had it not been for my daughters, I don't know that I would still be here. And I chose to fight. And so how it happened for me was just recognizing that I need to put my ego aside and submitting to the fact that I've got some stuff, I got some demons I need to unpack. I got myself in trauma or in therapy to unpack some things. But then I started, what I realized was I think I suffered from a fixed mindset most of my life. And then I'm like, okay, how can I change and rewrite the script? How can I change this? I can't go on living like this. So what do I need to do to change? And I started inventorying like all the people that I just looked up to, like being incredibly successful, and how are they happy while they do it? What are they doing that I'm not doing? And that led me down the path of personal growth and development, which ultimately led me to performance coaching. And I just found that when you are performing at a high level, resiliency is not something. There's a lot of resiliency program, even how the Army does it. It's very defensive in nature. So if I do these things, I'll be a resilient person. Well, I truly feel that if you're performing at a high level, you're clear about who you are and what you want, and you're taking bold action, and you're incredibly productive. You're doing your life's work, and you're focusing on how you can influence people better. Like resiliency is like a byproduct, because you're living life on offense versus this very passive defensive nature. So I guess that's a long way to say how it happened for me was, trying to overcome, me wanting to end my life. And now I feel like I've completely turned it around. And I want to help other people not feel the same things. There's a lot of people out there suffering in silence.
Jay, and you hear about that a lot. You hear about veterans and active military who, struggle.
Yeah.
Suicide is unfortunately way too prevalent. And, you got help. You recognized your situation before it was too late. I'm wondering and I don't, you don't have to go there if you don't want to, but, where you actually mentioned the gun that you had and, what you were thinking about doing. What's on that day, what stopped you? You said it was your children, but you went back wherever you went anyway, with the intention, at least you thought to. So yeah. What stopped you? Do you know?
It was the thought. So I have experienced 8 other suicides in my life. And it was the thought of, I've had people in my life that have taken their life, and that pain is amplified. Like the order of magnitude of that pain is amplified far more than any other thing. Like as tragic as cancer is, as tragic as a car accident is, I can kind of understand it and compute it better. But a suicide, I just can't. And having first-hand knowledge of that, to give that gift of pain to my children, that would be the legacy that I would leave them behind. I just couldn't do it, because I even thought about, like, maybe they would be better off without me. Maybe they're going to get, this insurance money, and they don't have to deal with me being an asshole and just not showing up. And it was just like, my thinking pattern was just so off, especially as I look back, I'm like, I just wasn't thinking right. My hard drive is just not processing information correctly. But that was really it. Like, I just needed, like, I didn't want to leave them with that pain, because I remember the pain that was left with me from the people that I was close to that had ended their life.
I think and I'm nowhere close to being a psychiatrist or psychologist or anything, but I feel like I've had people in my life, or people that I've known, who maybe weren't close to me, but, ended up committing suicide. And I've always wondered that to myself, like, they're thinking that it's going to be better for them and everyone else, presumably, if they're not here. But I feel like oftentimes there's this feeling that it'll just end, and it'll end for me, and it'll end for everybody, isn't really the reality. It just starts for everybody else, because, as you said, you can't understand. People can understand when you die, through an illness or an accident or whatever. They don't understand when you just, right?
And I would have been one of those individuals that it would have been a big surprise to a lot of people, because sometimes you just like, wow, how did that guy do that? Because I was always, especially at work, I put the military first, and I was highly engaged and highly successful in all that I did. I really suffered in silence, because as an officer in the Army, you can't show a lot of weakness. You gotta stuff that stuff away.
There's status, right? There's status to be maintained.
Absolutely. And I did a very good job of doing that. Now, I was kind of irritable at times. I was miserable. I think people like, man, that guy's kind of grumpy sometimes. They could see that. But then, yeah, but it was incredibly painful to bear that burden of just, I don't know, just being completely miserable. And,
Mm.
the pain was just so much to bear. It's a really dark, bad place to be.
Yeah, I can only imagine, but how could it not be anything but,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Um, and so, yeah, that's, I don't ever want to be in that place again. And, I don't want, I know that other people suffer in silence, and I just want people to know that they're not alone, and that they can change the trajectory of their mindset, but it's going to take some work. It's going to take work. And that's what, that's kind of the movement and the mission of the Do Hard Things nation, is to help people start, rewire the mindset, and change the trajectory of their life to feel that way.
And when you mentioned at the beginning, and I want to spend a lot of time on the 10 years since that, I think you said that was 10 years ago. I want to spend a lot of time on the 10 years since. But I first want to go back to, you had mentioned when you answered the how it happened question, how you grew up. And I think people are interested, and I am interested in what led you into the military in the first place. Kind of what were you thinking as a kid growing up? How were you thinking about your future, I guess?
Yeah, so I'm first generation American. My father immigrated here from Germany, and my mother immigrated here from Holland. And my father was a child during World War II. And, to keep a long story short, the bottom line was all the men went off. They were all, they were part of the German Wehrmacht, and fought in the military. The women and the children stayed behind. The men never came home. And then ultimately they were living in a village near Berlin. And when the Soviet Union came in, like, they basically put my family on a truck to evacuate them to another village or camp or something. And my grandmother was holding my father at the end of the truck, but all his sisters and all the women of the family were on this truck, and it came under attack. And the only people that survived was my grandmother and my father. And he basically grew up the rest of the Reconstruction, without a family,
Hmm.
and ultimately immigrated here when he was 19. Now, with all of that trauma that he had as a child, he struggled the rest of his life. And so he was incredibly emotionally and physically abusive when he met my mother in California. That was probably wife number 4, I believe. And there were
Oh,
more since then. And there were at least 9 of us children. There's 5 brothers that I know that I have that I never met. So that kind of paints a picture of, he just went from relationship to relationship. When I was around him, he was physically abusive to me and my mother. And then ultimately he ran off with another woman. My mother was incapable of taking care of me. And then he basically started this relationship with this other woman. And basically that relationship ended. My mother couldn't take care of me, so he left me with them. They adopted me, but it wasn't a good situation. And so it just continued with the physical and emotional abuse. Um, and but throughout my childhood, like, I knew that there had to be something better, because I'm seeing these other kids at school, like, man, their family seems like they're really well put together. What are they doing? I just had this drive of, like, I know I can get out of this situation. I know that I can, if I can just survive this. And what could I do? I could, I was fascinated with the military, given the World War II history of my family and the
hmm.
US Army. And I'm like, you know what? If I join the military, they seem like you get to be a part of something greater than yourself. There's a lot of role models over there. They're going to pay for college. You get a skill. If I can just bridge the gap and get there, I'll be all right. And so that was kind of like, what motivated me as a kid. And what really helped me, and this is why I'm passionate about the mantra, do hard things, and running, is that I was a paper boy in a town called Clarksville, Missouri. It's the highest point on the Mississippi River. And there's a huge ass hill. And I would ride my bike. I started this when I was 12 years old. And I would ride my bike 6 days a week, delivering newspapers. And it was a way for me to, earn some money. I learned a little bit of grit and discipline in that. I was able to get out of the house every day. So as soon as I got home from school, I could just get on my bike and go ride my bike. And it felt good to do that. And And in that, I developed a pretty good cardio base, a pretty good fitness base.
Hmm.
And I had met, we had a new social studies teacher who was also the new track and cross country coach. I delivered newspapers to his house, and he kind of befriended me, and he invited me out to cross country. And for the first time in my life, through running cross country, I was part of a team. And we had some of the cooler kids in my class that I looked up to with the well put together families. I'm like, man, these are like some good kids. I was able to kind of fit in with them. I was part of a team, and we actually had a winning team. And it was the first time in my life that I had like something to really look forward to. And I'm like, man, if I just do this hard thing, because running's hard. When you're running competition, it's hard. And I was running sub 6 minute miles. I was running, I think my fastest 5K was like a 15:45. So we were throwing down some fast times, and it was hard. It was so hard. I'm like, if I just do this hard thing, and that's what kept me out of trouble. It motivated me to keep my grades up, because you needed to keep your grades up so you could, run track.
Mm-hmm.
It kept me from getting in trouble, because I was really passionate about running track and cross country. And it was a great segue to start my military career, because when I started, when I got in the military, going to basic training, I was on the running team, and I ran in the Army 10 miler for Redstone Arsenal when I was stationed there, and I got into running, and that led to mountain bike racing, and that led to other adventure sports that was all really good for me. And
Okay.
so, long story short, that's really how I ended up getting into running cross country and track, and why that was so meaningful to me and helped me bridge the gap to get into the military, to close out that chapter of my upbringing.
Hey, everybody, just a quick pause here to let you know how much I appreciate that you've made time for my podcast. If you're not already a subscriber, please become one today. Leave a review and tell a friend. Now, let's get back to the show.
And you went through this pretty quickly, but I want to make sure I have this right. So your father left your mother
Mm-hmm.
for another relationship. Your mother was incapable of taking care of you.
Yep.
And so then you went to live with the woman who was the next wife or relationship of your dad's. Is that right?
Yep.
And was he still in that relationship? That part I couldn't.
No, he left.
So he moved on, and so this woman is in his life for some period of time, and then she becomes your guardian or whatever.
Absolutely. Yep. That's what happened.
She adopted you?
Adopted me, yes, but I wasn't her birth child. So
right, yeah.
But she did have two other. I did have a brother and sister, so half brother and sister from my father.
Okay.
Kind of treated them different than she treated me. Because I wasn't her birth child. So, like I said,
yeah. Well,
stuff there. Did
she feel obligated to take? Like, I'm just trying to figure out the math here.
Yeah, so she felt obligated to take care of me, but I wasn't her birth child, so they did treat me different. And this was a very impoverished home. There was a lot of there was a lot of gambling, and I'm talking kind of redneckish, like washer dryer on the front porch of the trailer kind of a thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Not a good scenario.
Like the Lang. What's their name in Ozarks? I don't know if you've watched that show. The Langmores.
Yeah, Langmores.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly like that. In fact, I remember when we lived in Clarksville, we made a double wide trailer because we took two trailers that were not supposed to be together, parked them side by side, cut a hole in the side to make extra living space, and we had wood heat. And I remember one winter that we ran out of wood, and we're chopping wood in the middle of the winter so we could have heat for the home. I mean, it was bad. It was bad. So I'm talking completely Langmores. Yeah, absolutely.
And do you have a relationship with your birth mom and dad now, or?
No, I kind of cut ties with them. When I went in the military, I just kind of shut that door. I kept in touch with them over the years here and there. She recently just passed, just a few months ago, and I actually went home to visit, and I got to see her right before she passed, and kind of made amends, and we talked about some things. And over the years, I kind of kept touch, but we weren't close. Okay. It's just something in order for me to move on and be successful. I just needed to close that chapter and shut
Yeah.
the door. And it was one of the more difficult things in my life to do, but it was necessary.
You think it was the right thing to do?
I have some regrets, maybe not keeping as close contact. I probably could have done better, but at the same time, I don't know if that would have served me. I don't know. It's hard when it's family and there's just a complicated dynamic. I don't know.
Well, I give you credit for going home and seeing her before, because I have a friend who had a relationship similar, not exactly, no relationships are exactly, but similar with his father, who, and he didn't do that. His father passed away, and he didn't do that. And I think that's, it's probably not something you want to do. I'm thinking, okay, it's easy to just say, well, screw it, that person's not been, much to me in my life, but there's something about being the bigger person at the end, before the end, that's meaningful, I think, to the person, and certainly, to the parent, for example, in this case, or to you. It's just like, it'd be the easy thing to do is be like, screw it. Yeah, well, whatever. But the hard thing to do is to go and.
Yeah. I had reached out because I knew she was in hospice at home. So I reached out like, hey, I'd love to see you if you're open to me to come by, because I think there was resentment for me not keeping in contact as well over the years. And when I went that morning, I left early, and I basically drove around town for a good hour or two. Like, how's this going to go? And I just went down like this complete memory lane before I even went there. And it was a hard day. It was a hard day. So I spent a couple hours driving around town, going like, when I was in high school, where I kind of hung out and walked the track where I used to run track. And because I hadn't been there in such a long time, and just kind of really like going back in time is how I felt, and just taking in all the emotion. And it was heavy. It was heavy. Then I went there, and, and I apologized, and I painted the case for why I did what I did. And I think we were both at peace, and stayed there the rest of the day. And it was emotional. I mean, remember, leaving that, I was in tears, and the next day being very emotional. And then ultimately she passed a couple of days later, and it was hard. It was a very hard situation. But I'm glad that I went and took the time to say goodbye and apologize and everything else that we do.
I think that was neat how you sort of observed, you sort of experienced everything from your childhood too, like beforehand. It's sort of it's a way to go down memory lane, but it seems like, as you were talking about, it was also a way to sort of gain some strength to have the interaction and a conversation with her.
Yeah. I just felt like I opened up a door of my past. I had to walk in it a little bit, spend some time there, and then close it. And it's just, I don't know, for me, it was the healthiest thing to do for my own mental health and my own perseverance, to do that.
Well, congratulations on that. I know that not an easy thing. So you get in the military, and you enlist, right? So you what's the rank that you have when you first go in?
So I joined when I was 17. I was in the Missouri Army National Guard, and I was an E1 private, and I did that for a couple years. You go to basic training between your junior and senior year of high school. So that also helped me get through my senior year of high school. And then when I turned, it was 17 to 19, I was in the Army National Guard. And then I went on active duty when I was 19.
Okay. And when you went in, were you thinking about, you had mentioned before about the college, being able to get the military to pay for college and that kind of thing. Were you thinking that was definitely what you were going to do? Like, that's part of one of the main reasons you were there, or was there something else going on?
I knew that I just wanted the adventure, and I wanted to make something of myself. I saw these type A guys. I'm like, man, I want to go there and be a badass, and maybe be an airborne ranger, and do all these crazy things, maybe be special forces, that's what kind of drew me. As far as college, no one in my family went to college. I didn't think that I was college material. So I'm like, I knew that was an option for me, but I'm like, I'll probably never go to college. And because no one had really pushed that onto me, and hindsight being 2020, I could have completely went to college. If I could do it all over again, I probably would have pursued an ROTC scholarship, or maybe have gone to one of the service academies. I was smart enough. I just didn't have the confidence and courage in myself. I mean, when I joined the military, I struggled to make eye contact. I struggled to use my voice. I was very timid, didn't have a lot of confidence. And so I was just like, I just want to get to basic training and just go, maybe I can get around these other people and they can whip me into shape. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. Okay.
But what I learned was, in the military, even if you're going to make a good career, you're going to have to go to college. So I basically, role models encouraged me and pushed me to get my ass in school. And I started chipping away at it. And I did it.
And I think it's amazing that not only did you do that, but you also earned, I think you said 2 master's degrees while you were in the military as well. Yeah. And just to be clear, I think you're transitioning out of the military. You're not out of the military yet, though. Is that correct?
Still in. Yep. I'll be out March next year officially. Yep.
March next year. Okay. So so college degree, master's degree number 1, master's degree number 2. So you're really doing more than most people, ever do. Certainly not with a full-time, job. And you also become an officer. So is that common, by the way, Jay? Is it common for people to move from, coming in as an enlisted person? I don't know. Is that the right thing to say now? Enlisted? Is that still the right
enlisted?
term?
Yeah.
Okay.
Enlisted. Yep.
And becoming an officer?
Yeah, it's a very small percentage that actually do that. And in fact, when they have officer candidate, there's basically 3 different commissioning sources. You have the service academy. So you have the Naval Academy in West Point for the Army. And you have, ROTC through your college program. And then you have officer candidate school. And officer candidate school is primarily for the enlisted. So there are individuals that, if they had a degree already and they enlist into the Army, they would go to basic training, and then they go to officer candidate school. Or if you've already been in the Army for a minute, like I was a non-commissioned officer, you apply, and then you go to officer candidate school. And so that's the way. But it was a very small percentage that did that. So I went from E1 to E7. So I was a higher ranking non-commissioned officer before I went. And I went to officer candidate school as honor graduate of class 411, and completely changed the trajectory of my military life, because it's a different type of work altogether.
And who was the person or persons who sort of got you on that track? Yeah, I think you sort of referenced that, you had people who sort of encouraged you to take that track. Is that?
Yeah, I had some just really influential officers throughout my years that it just inspired me I had great NCOs who are like, hey, if you're going to make something of yourself, while you're in the Army, you got to get your college degree. And if you want to accelerate, even on the non-commissioned officer side, you have to have a bachelor degree if you're going to make like the senior enlisted rank. So I'm like, okay, I just need to bear down and do this. In addition to, it kind of really, there are a lot of other people that are taking advantage of the college opportunity there. So when you're around other people, it becomes like expected of you to do that. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to get myself in school, and I want to achieve that rank, and I want to push it so I can do this. And once I got into the rhythm of going to school, it wasn't so bad. Now, it was difficult. It took me 10 years to get my bachelor degree, but doing this in between field exercises, it's, being in the military and going to college in the evening is probably the hardest way to go to college, but I got it done. And it's the same way, once you become a commissioned officer, you're expected to have a master's degree. And oh, by the way, as an engineer, they had this other program where you could pick up a master's degree at the captain's career course. And so that it just kind of worked out for me. But it wasn't the trajectory of what I thought I would do when I initially joined. But to answer your question, I just had some phenomenal leaders, some of the most amazing people physically, from just values-based leaders that were just exceptional human beings, like those role models that we're looking for. There's so many remarkable leaders in the military. There's so many countless people that inspired me. I think of Colonel Sam Volkman or Colonel Gollinghurst. They were all young lieutenants and majors and captains when I met them, but they have flourished. All these remarkable leaders that just kind of encouraged me, like, I can do this. And I had a lot of people like, you carry yourself like an officer, and you're intelligent. Why don't you do that? And so what happened to me was I went to Iraq in OIF 1. So the first in 2003, I was there. And when I had came back, I went on recruiting assignment, and it was in that recruiting assignment that it was typically a 3-year tour. It ultimately became a 6-year tour for me because we had the triplets during that time frame. And I was able to finish my college degree, which is a requirement for officer candidate school. But also I was a combat engineer. And when I was initially trained, we were trained to go out and, we place obstacles or we remove obstacles. We're the guys that go out and put in minefields or remove minefields. Well, in Iraq, the IED threat, the improvised IEDs, the improvised explosive devices were really ramping up. And so my job skill had changed significantly due to the IED threats. And because I was in recruiting duty, I didn't feel like I had the skills because I was going to go right back into a leadership position. I'm like, this is a great segue for maybe me to pursue this path as a commissioned officer, because I would probably, although I was my career had been accelerated, going back at that time, I probably would have been actually technically behind for my technical proficiency. I'm like, this was a great segue for me to pursue going to officer candidate school. And it worked out great. I did that, and I excelled at that, and I became an engineer officer. So same career field, but as an officer.
So removing obstacles, I think about removing obstacles in all different parts of life, right? So doing hard things, for example, is removing obstacles, whether they be in your brain or your body or, your geography or whatever. But tell me, I'm interested in, like, you mentioned the IEDs, but what kind of planning goes into removing obstacles in a war zone, for example? Like, can you take us through an example of something you've done and how you did it?
Yeah, so we have this we have this thing called SOSERA, and it's basically a reminder of the steps that you would take, because when the obstacle is in place by the enemy, they're expecting you to be there. And in fact, when you maneuver to an obstacle, it's probably one of the most dangerous places on the battlefield, because the enemy there's usually a natural obstacle. And so that there's, when you're looking at how to get from point A to point B to attack the enemy, we look at terrain, and obviously, well, there's a mountain here. It would be better for us to go up the valley. Okay, well, that's where the enemy's going to put all their obstacles. That's where they're going to put their minefields, because they know that you're not going to go up the mountain. You're going to come right up the valley, right? So they're going to put their obstacle there. So what we want to do is you want to suppress the enemy. So we have this mnemonic called SOSERA. So you're going to suppress the enemy. You want to fix them in place. They're going to be shooting at you. So you want to overwhelm them with fire so they stop shooting at you. And then you're going to obscure the objective with smoke, because you're going to maneuver to the objective, but you're going to need to put some smoke there. So as you're shooting at the enemy, you're keeping their heads down. You want to put smoke out there and obscure your maneuver to the obstacle so you can reduce it. So suppress, obscure, secure, that's you getting onto the obstacle. Like, okay, we're here now, but we need to, because there's going to be enemy nearby, we want to make sure that the reduction force is going to be safe enough to remove the obstacle. So suppress, obscure, secure. Now we're going to reduce the obstacle. And if it's mines, we would use a line charge called a MICLIC, a mine clearing line charge. It's like an explosive device. Or we would use C4, or if it's a wire obstacle, we would use Bangalore torpedoes. We've seen like Saving Private Ryan, where they're on the beach and they're like putting in these long pipes and just full of explosives, and they're blowing up the wire. So stuff like that. Or, maybe it's just snipping the wire. But however, whatever means to basically punch a hole through this obstacle and clear it, reduce it, and then we assault through. Then we punch through to the other side. And so there's this whole procedure that we do, and these elements have to be in the proper sequence, because if you don't, you're going to lose a lot of combat power. Because, like I said, the obstacle is where the enemy knows that they're expecting you to be there. So that's where they're going to have all their guns, and they're going to try to inflict as many casualties as possible.
Hey everyone, if you like what I'm doing with this podcast and want to participate in more of the things I'm thinking about and exploring, subscribe to my newsletter today. It's super simple. Just go to mikemalatesta.com right now, put in your email, and you will get the very next issue. It's short, thoughtful, and designed to inspire, activate, and maximize the greatness in you.
An example of this just recently would have been like, I forgot the river that the Russians just crossed, but they just had an abysmal river crossing. And a river crossing is an obstacle. It's the same fundamentals. Well, they didn't execute these principles, and they lost, I think, a whole a battalion-sized element trying to cross this river. That we look at, it's like, holy cow, they didn't execute any of these principles, and they got their ass handed to them. Lost like 73 vehicles. It's crazy.
And is it normal to have time to, well, I shouldn't say that. There's probably times when you have time, you've got intelligence, you have time, you can sort of plan your way through this. And there's probably others when, like in the case of an IED that you didn't expect, or something where you encounter it and then you have to, SOSERA like on the fly sort of thing. Is that accurate?
And the principles still apply. You just do them in rapid succession with what you have,
Okay.
So that's one thing that's like this SOSERA is like what they just like all combat engineers know what this is. It's a battle drill that you practice over and over and over again. In fact, it's I remember like when I was a young trooper, like we would, it's basically like a football play. We would actually we would do PT in the morning. Then the platoon started like, okay, we're out on this field. Like, okay, here's the obstacle here. Let's run through the play and just kind of talk through it and run through it. Even while we didn't even have our equipment. We would just kind of talk through it like a football play, like a dry fire kind of thing. It was so ingrained in us. So when something does happen, like, okay, SOSERA, okay, we know that we need to do these things, because the thing about being an engineer is that these obstacles come in a variety of different shapes and forms, and we never know what we're going to encounter, but the principles have to be the same. And that's how we're going to survive.
Yeah. Okay.
That was the battle drill.
It kind of reminds me of like cyber, that's the way cyber is, right? Cybercrime, you always got to stay ahead of, and everybody's always trying to lure you into something that they think you'll go into, right? Because there's the trap, except, yours is like physical cyber, like, here's a bomb. Or here's where all of our tanks are waiting to, attack you or whatever. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for taking us through that. You mentioned when I asked you about, mentors and stuff, the incredible leadership in the military. And it made me think to ask you, leadership, you hear that leadership is the one thing that's everyone craves, but it's so hard to find. And it made me think while you were talking about that, how does, in your estimation at least, how is it so successful at either attracting, leaders, born leaders or whatever, or creating them? What do you think?
I wouldn't say that I was like a natural born leader in any way, shape, or form. I mean, if people that know me from when I first joined, they look at me now like, holy cow, like, who are you? I had no idea that you would, be this confident and this successful given all of the situations that you had as a child. And when I look back at like for what happened with me, the Army instills the Army values in you from day one: loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, because we all come from different walks of life, and we come from different socioeconomic backgrounds, different races, different genders, different sexual orientations now, but none of that matters in the military. None of that matters. You wear the uniform, you live up to the Army values. So from day one, they're instilling that. And from a leadership perspective, I mean, there's still people that join the military that don't want to be leaders. They come in and they're in the lower ranks and they get out after 4 years. But really, if you're going to stay in at every level, every rank, you have to go through some form of education. They take you through some form of school. But even in your unit, like they'll identify the people that want to step up, because you're only in the Army for maybe, for most people, it's only 20 years. So the turnover is actually pretty quick. But we've got to develop leaders rapidly. So it's like little things like, okay, hey, private, you're going to be leading PT today. And it's like forcing that individual to get out in front of his squad and like, okay, you're going to lead PT. And, one of my biggest fears was always looking like a jackass in front of my squad mates, so that was like really the driver's not looking like a fool, because they're going to make fun of you. You're never going to hear the end of it. But you would have that squad leader or that sergeant there that would be like kind of coaching you through it. And that gave you courage and confidence to do it again. And through that repetition, forcing you to get out of your comfort zone and having that coach or mentor there to force you to do the repetition. And I think that's why the military does it so well, is because they take people before they think they're ready and push them into those positions and then force them. So when I was the commander and I was an instructor at the Engineer Basic Officer Leadership course, I was an instructor there, and then I became the commander. So we basically trained every engineer or lieutenant that came to the United States Army had to go to the Engineer Basic Officer Leadership course. And we had to basically train them and baseline them to be engineer leaders. And when they left, they were young lieutenants. They were going to leave here, and we're still doing combat rotations in Afghanistan. They were going to lead a platoon of 40, 50, engineers into combat. So we had to make sure that they were ready. And these are, 22, 23-year-old men and women. And so in a very rapid, short amount of time, we had to basically take them and just push them hard, like just put them into positions and give them proper coaching and guidance and get them out of their comfort zone to deal with these things. And I think that's why the military, because we're constantly doing that, whether you're ready or not. Hey, it's your turn to get up and lead this thing. We're going to put you in this position to, execute this project or do these things, and always trying to rotate people and cycle them, because leadership development is so incredibly important to the military to replenish that leadership and have that environment where we're constantly churning leaders. And that's one thing that I really appreciate about the military.
Yeah, and the way you said it there was really interesting, because you weren't, so in the military, they're not waiting for you to raise your hand and say, I'm ready to take the first step. They realize, I think, that most people aren't going to just raise their hand because they don't want to look like a fool, because they don't think they're ready, because whatever.
Yeah.
So instead, we pluck you.
Yeah, absolutely.
We pluck you and we put you there and we say, we think you can be a leader. Let's get started.
Yeah. And that's one thing that I've learned about the military, is that because you switch positions so quickly. So by the time you get something figured out, you're already in the next role. And then by the time you get that one figured out, you're in the next role after that. And so what I've learned over the years is, like, because I used to be very nervous and self-conscious about myself. And I'm like, you know what? Everyone that I know is dealing with the same thing. They're just now trying to figure out who they are. The colonel is in his position. He's only been there for 4 months. He's still trying to figure out his bearings. Now, he has confidence from his previous positions,
right,
but in his current role, he's still trying to figure it out. So everyone is in this constant state of trying to figure out their current role. And when I realized that, I'm like, okay, that made me feel a little bit better. If I screw something up or if I fall short, you're going to have some grace with people, because other people are doing the same thing. They know what it's like.
And so 2 things you said there that I think are really important. One is, that reminded me of, like, the entrepreneurial journey, right? You have to put on new hats before you've got them figured out, but you have some confidence, or your past has sort of given you hope that you can do it in the future. And then the other thing is, the older I get, the more I realize that there are very few people who actually know what they think they know, or know that. Like, the older I get, the less I'm sure that I know everything. And I think that's wisdom, right? Because you get to a certain point, you don't have to fake it anymore. You can just be real with people. Like, I'm really good at this, this, and this. And you know what? I don't have this figured out yet. So I need some help figuring that out. Or you can't rely on me to figure to do the thing out, instead of like, oh yeah, I got it. I'll do it. And anyway,
I think it's putting that ego aside. Eventually you get to a point where it's like, okay, you figure out, like, okay, most people don't know all the answers. And that's okay.
Right.
Because at least you're not bullshitting someone or tap dancing around something. Like, it's okay to not know.
And
but
that
are you going to find out? Yeah.
Yeah, right. And that makes it a lot easier too, to step into this, I don't want to be a fool, and put that thinking aside and go, well, everybody's a fool. So I might as well
that goes back. That's that fixed mindset. And I will say this, that the military, for the most part, is a fixed mindset organization. But I've learned, as I broke through, like, having a growth mindset and finally breaking through that, like, okay, it made the military a lot easier, and it's made life a lot easier, because like, okay, I don't know everything, but I do have the capability of learning things and figuring it out. And like, it's okay to like put my ego aside. I think that's all a mark of having a growth mindset.
So let's talk about this. So, you took us through how you were feeling 10 years ago, and, you got help, and you said you had a fixed mindset at the time. Now you're talking about a growth mindset. I mentioned at the beginning, it's a story of transition and reinvention, and then you added transformation to it, which I should have had in the first place. What's that chapter of your transformation story been like? Because it seems to me like you had this horrible low. I call it, being at the bottom of the valley of uncertainty. That's what I would call that thing. And you started climbing back out of there. And now, 10 years later, you are getting ready to leave your military service and become the do hard things person. And I feel like there's a lot of people, whether they're in the military or not, who go through a period of time, like 25 years, you doing it, and maybe some of the hard times that you mentioned. And instead of being excited about reinventing themselves or continuing to transform and impact a lot of people, they start thinking, well, what am I going to do now? Kind of thing. 25, well, yeah, I'm going to get out of the military. Then what? And you aren't doing that. Why?
I stayed in the military for a long time because I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up.
Okay.
And the thought of going to work for corporate America kind of scared me, because I wanted to do something where I served. I continued to, because I felt just part of this noble profession. And there's a certain level of comfort with it too, because I know the Army culture. I know the Army, once you get in the groove of it, yes, it's a hard lifestyle, but it's also very easy. I don't have to figure out what I'm going to wear today. I know if I'm here at this time, that's 70% of it. Just do what you need to do. I'm getting paid on the 1st and the 15th. There are a lot of things about the military that just make it life easy, but you have these hardships because you're away from home and you're doing stressful exercises. So it's kind of this weird dichotomy of like, a lot of things are easy, but a lot of things are hard. And I didn't know what I wanted to do for the longest time, until I hit the valley of uncertainty and I had that epiphany. And that climbing out of that was incredible. It wasn't easy. And it took me putting my ego aside to getting myself in therapy. It took me, changing my habits, changing my friend pool. It ultimately led to a divorce along the way, and a lot of uncertainty, because when you're still transitioning from the military now, like I feel like I'm shedding a big part of myself. However, having this new mission of being a performance coach and helping other people, I had to re-tap into my purpose and just realize that my purpose wasn't tied into my military service, that I could serve beyond the uniform. And when I had reached out to some mentors, a lot of my military mentors was like, you know what, you should just stay in the Army. You could stay and probably be a full bird colonel. You could do 30, 35 years. Because you're a bright officer. You still have a bright future. But I had one officer in particular that's familiar with my coaching and familiar with what I'm doing. He basically gave me permission. He's like, Jay, you're going to be able to do greater things with coaching and with this movement that you have, with this lifestyle brand of doing hard things, than you ever will in the military. And so it's okay to leave. You can leave the service. We're all going to have to take this uniform off at some point. And, and I felt like he gave me permission and kind of gave me the confidence I needed to, like, you know what, I can hang it up. Because I thought long and hard about, going to ILE, the Command General Staff College, and continuing to stay in. And there's still a part of me that's like, man, what would my life be like if I continued down that path? It'd be awesome to be a battalion commander. It would be fantastic to be a brigade commander. But I closed the chapter. I put in my retirement paperwork, and I'm going down the entrepreneurial path and trying and going this route. And feel that sense of purpose and mission again. And I feel driven, and I feel, like I said, I don't want anyone to ever feel like I felt before. And I want to help people live a better life. And so I'm really
Yeah.
excited about that.
Just a short break here to ask you a question. Have you read my book? It's called Ownership: How Getting Selfish Got Me Unstuck, and it's available on Amazon, Audible, and everywhere else. If you're looking for inspiration that will help you unlock your greatness and potential, order or download your very own copy today.
This retirement paperwork, I have to ask this, did you make the decision and then just do it? Or were you like, was it sitting there sort of on your desk? Like, I know I got to get that. Okay. All right.
No, it was sitting there. It was a lot of conversations. And in fact, I was selected the top 50% of officers, because every time you get promoted, there's a leadership school. So my next school was to go to Fort Leavenworth at Command General Staff College. Well, if you're top 50%, you get selected to go. So I was selected to go. I had to go to my first general officer in my chain of command and basically like ask them to write a letter for me to let me go from this, release me from this, which is ultimately saying that I'm basically quitting the Army, essentially. Because if you don't go, if you're hand selected and you don't go, well, it's not going to get promoted again. So that paperwork sat there for a good month, and I had lots of conversations, and I went a lot of runs, and just, man, what am I going to do? Wringing my hands over this thing. And then I finally made the decision. It was basically after that conversation. That was the conversation that I needed from someone that I respected. Like, okay, it's okay to let go. Why am I holding on to this thing? Because there's still aspects of the Army that weren't serving me. I mean, one of the reasons that I wanted to kill myself, because I wasn't feeling like I was like, I just, there's some aspects of the Army that I'm kind of over. You know, I love it, but it's an abusive relationship. I need to let this relationship go. And once I realized that, like, I can continue to serve at the same capacity and have purpose beyond, you know, then that was it. That's all I needed.
It's like the next hill at Clarksville, you know, with your paper route. You know, now it's time for your next.
So it's time for the next thing. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm excited.
So, Jay, you help people develop courage and confidence. And I'm wondering, like, how do you go about that? Because that seems hard. So tell me how you people that you work with, that you help them develop courage and confidence. How do you do that?
Well, there are a lot of fears that hold us back. It's the fears that we fear. And there's so many people that have lofty goals. They have a vision for themselves, but they get stuck in the day-to-day grind. They get stuck in these ruts, and they fear if they embark on something, they're fearing the judgment of other people. They also fear the hardship that they might endure. If I quit my job to go pursue this entrepreneurial endeavor, but what if I don't make it? What if I can't make ends meet? Maybe there's a learning curve there, and so there's hardships that people have to embody to do this thing. Or what if I do all of these things and the grass isn't greener on the other side? Like I go through this whole process and things aren't better. So we tend to stay stuck with our familiarity. Because we'll endure that because we're familiar with it. And so a lot of people get stuck. And so I find myself as a coach, like, helping people, like, okay, let's identify specifically what you want. And let's, like, what are the legitimate fears? And then how can we hedge some of these things? And one of the easiest things that I help people with confidence is just really sticking to, like, simple goals. If I want to build confidence with someone or help them, it's identifying simple goals and just starting to complete them, seeing them through to the finish. Because so many people start something, whether it's a health and fitness program, or maybe it's a financial goal, or maybe it's a relationship goal. They'll start down the path, but then they get distracted or unfocused and they don't see it through. And what I've learned over time is that your subconscious keeps score on these things. The more things that you leave unfinished, the more that rattles your confidence in your ability to do things. So it's simple answer is to just start to see things through to the end, commit to things, identify why it's important and how your life will benefit from it, and visualize how your life will change. And then let's see this thing through all the way to the end. In the There's 5 stages of emotional change. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's in the 12-week year. Brian Moran talks about in his book, 12-week year. And I think about the valley of uncertainty, because stage 3 is the valley of despair. Anytime that you start anything, I think about like New Year's, right? Everyone's at the gym.
Right, sure.
You're new me, we're working out. I'm committed to this 90-day P90X workout, but then about 30 days into it, like it's not fun anymore. It starts to suck. We have, our old habits creep in. Well, they get in that valley of despair. And it's like, well, you know what? I'm going to throw this out. You know what? I'm going to order the Peloton and try that. And I'll try that program. And I'll commit to that for a little bit. And then I get tired of that. And I go on to this other thing. I'll do the ketogenic diet, maybe some other, And so people are constantly in the cycle of not finishing things. Well, that wears on your confidence. And so that's usually one of the first places we start. Let's find something that you want to do and let's stick to it. Yeah. I, as a coach, will hold you accountable to that. Like, let's see this thing through to the end. Let's get some reps in on that and get confident with completing things. And then once you get more confident with that, then you can take on bigger things and you start to see things through. Because that's the one thing that I've learned, it's grit, fortitude, and focus. Those are the 3 fundamentals of the 3 values of the Do Hard Things Nation. If we can face courage and see things through when it gets tough, and if you can, Angela Duckworth talks about it in her book, Grit, right? It's passion and perseverance and seeing it through when it gets hard. That's where people make the biggest impact. That's where the breakthrough happens, is seeing it through when you want to quit and getting laser focused. Because right now we live in a society where there's just too much distraction. There's too much entertainment. There's too much going on. But if we can get singularly focused, you put those 3 elements together, you're going to start crushing through goals and you're going to become more confident.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm glad you took us through that, and as you were talking, I was thinking like, okay, so a lot of times for people, imagining going from A to Z is just too big of an imagination, right?
Yeah.
But going from A to B isn't. So instead of focusing on A to Z, let's focus on getting you from A to B, and then B to C, and then right, and then you're building confidence. Like, oh, I can do this, right?
Yeah.
And like the getting in shape thing reminded me, like you can pound PX90 or whatever it's called till it sucks, right? But it starts to suck more when you look at yourself and you go, nothing's changing. I'm still the same. And then you go, oh, well, you're still eating. You're actually eating more because you're telling yourself, well, I'm doing this workout every day. So your habits beyond the workout habit, for example, is actually impeding your progress.
Which why it's so important to have accountability, like people around you that are going through the program with you, or an outside perspective, a coach or someone to call you out on it. Just see what you can't see, because sometimes you just can't see the forest from the trees because you're in it. But there's some things that you're doing that are glaringly obvious to other people, but you don't see it yourself.
Yeah. So how do people for whom the Do Hard Things Nation is resonating, how do they get a hold of you, Jay? Who are you looking for, to be in your community, and what can you promise them?
Yeah. So I'm looking for growth-minded people that are wanting to they know that there's something better for them, and creating this tribe of people. And hard actually has a meaning. Do means take action. Hard is broken down into 4 key lines of effort in your life. Your health and wellness. So being intentional every day about your health and wellness. It's your affluence and wealth. It's your being able to create financial freedom for yourself. So you have the freedom to do what you want and give what you want and continue to give back. R stands for relationships. So pouring into your partner, pouring into your kids and your community and your friends. And then D is your development. If you're not developing yourself, if you're not growing, Tony Robbins talks about this all the time, if you're not growing, you're dying. And so having balance in these 4 key lines of effort in your life, and then doing hard things means doing things that actually matter. Are you doing your life's work? Are you focused on the things that truly matter? And so it's supposed to serve as a reminder that I can do hard things. And usually if you look at the things in your life that are worth a damn, they're usually with something that's difficult, overcoming an obstacle. It's pursuing that thing that's not an easy endeavor, but that's usually where fulfillment comes from. And that's usually where things that you remember in your life, anything that you remember in your life that was worth anything, usually is tied in with doing something that challenged you as a person. So I get people all the time because we're doing the apparel, people wearing it and they're like running their first 5K, or maybe they finished their first marathon, or people like, what, I went to a funeral today and underneath my clothes, I wore this Do Hard Things shirt. So it's a reminder that I can do hard things. It's basically, just developing a resilient mindset, a life on offense. I think about Jordan Peterson, like becoming a monster. He talks about being a monster. It's like, be the person at the funeral that, you're not going to fall apart, that people can lean on. Be that person. Doesn't mean that you don't have emotions, but don't be the one that's falling apart, right? Be the person that's strong. And that takes a different type of strength. And I truly feel that if you can find opportunities in a controlled environment to strengthen yourself, that when life happens, when suffering inevitably happens to you or hardship comes into your life, because it will, that's the one common denominator between all of us, is that we have suffering. You're going to be able to handle it better and ultimately encourage people to step up to be the role models that our society desperately needs right now. Our society is void in leadership. So if you make yourself better, you can step in to your family stronger and hopefully, encourage you to be a role model in your society. So we're looking for men and women that are, it's a lifestyle brand, actively pursuing difficult things. A lot of it's health and wellness based, because that's an easy thing that you can exercise every day. I do one-on-one coaching workshops. I'm going to be offering retreats here pretty soon. I want to take people out and do like this physical engaging activity, but we're doing some high performance coaching along the way. I'm doing group workshops. And what I see for the Do Hard Things Nation is maybe a bench of coaches, mindset coaches that are pouring into the community and creating this tribe of people. We're going to start hosting like running events and things like that to challenge people. And I want to I'm going to start the Do Hard Things Foundation, where we specifically work with veterans and law enforcement and bring in coaching and retreat specifically for them to help them maybe find their next mission after their service. So those are all the things that I'm working on. But people can get a hold of us at dohardthingsnation.com and jtiegs.com.
And that's JAYTIEGS.com.
Yes, sir.
And so if you like what you heard, check it out. If you want to become part of the Do Hard Things Nation, which sounds pretty cool, and you want to engage with Jay, set up a meeting with him, and you can tell he's ready to go. So set up a meeting with him and learn more. So Jay, thank you so much for being on the show today. It's been great. Thank you for taking us through so many different parts of your life, both hard parts and the inspirational. Well, they're all inspirational, I suppose, but hard parts and growth parts and transformation parts and adaptability parts, all the parts. So thanks, Jay.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Mike. Thank you.